Once I live a life of a millionaire. Keep it right there. Spending my money, honey.
On a sweltering Los Angeles night in 1974, the lights inside Studio Instrument Rentals buzzed above Bobby Womack like restless insects. Moments earlier, he had stumbled into the hallway, gripping the wall as the world dissolved into black. The doctors would call it temporary blindness. Bobby called it something else the moment his life finally caught up with him. The cocaine runs that lasted for days, the hallucinations that whispered in empty rooms, the brother lost in a violent blur, the marriage scorched by betrayal and a gunshot. Fame had polished him into a soul prince, but in the shadows, something darker pulled him under. To his fans, he was velvet, genius, unstoppable. To himself, he was a man, standing on the edge of a cliff he built with his own hands. What pushed Bobby Womack from brilliance into oblivion? This is the untold truth of Bobby Womack. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Bobby Womack's entry into music didn't begin under stage lights. It began in a cramped Cleveland living room in 1952, when a 7-year-old Bobby picked up his father's forbidden guitar. He snapped a string within minutes and, terrified, replaced it with a shoelace. That single act of defiance shifted the air in the Womack household. His father, Friendly Sr., ran rehearsals like military drills, sometimes pushing the 5 Womack brothers through 6-hour practice sessions without breaks. It was discipline, but it was also control. And Bobby absorbed both. By 1954, the Womack brothers were already performing in local churches, clocking 2 to 3 performances per week. At just 10 years old, Bobby was playing to audiences of 200 and singing harmonies adults struggled with. But the real turning point came in 1960, when Sam Cooke discovered the brothers and signed them to SAR Records. Bobby was 16. It should have been the dream of a lifetime. Instead, it became his first education in the politics of fame. Cooke pushed Bobby to switch from gospel to secular music, a decision that split the family for months. Bobby recorded Looking for a Love at just 17. The single hit the Billboard R&B charts and sold over 100,000 copies in its first run. Yet behind the celebration, Bobby felt the weight of something darker. He was suddenly the chosen one of the family, the one Cooke praised, the one audiences wanted out front. That spotlight didn't lift him. It separated him. And the cracks began to form jealousy among brothers, pressure from Sam, and a growing fear that he was becoming someone his own family no longer recognized. The seed of the coming tragedy was already planted. Success arrived for Bobby Womack with brutal speed. In 1962, when he was just 18, It's All Over Now became the breakout hit that pushed his name into national airplay long before the Rolling Stones turned it into an international success just 45 days later. The royalties should have made Bobby wealthy, but early contracts meant he received only a fraction of the revenue. Even at his peak, a shadow trailed him, the realization that success was something he performed, not something he owned. The illusion grew brighter in 1964, when Sam Cooke brought Bobby deeper into his world. Cooke had released 29 singles charting in the top 40, and Bobby suddenly found himself in studios where each hour cost $300, surrounded by producers who understood the mathematics of fame better than he did. For Bobby, these sessions felt like walking through a cathedral, sacred, enormous, and intimidating. What he didn't know was how quickly it would all collapse. Cooke's death in December 1964 detonated everything. Bobby, then 20, watched the man who shaped his career vanish overnight. In less than 11 weeks, he made the catastrophic decision to marry Cooke's widow, Barbara. It wasn't just controversial, it was radioactive. Newspapers counted the gap. Only 77 days after Cooke's death, fans calculated the betrayal. Industry executives did, too. This was Bobby's blind spot. He believed loyalty to Barbara would shield him from judgment. He didn't understand yet that the public measured grief with a stopwatch. The prophecy moment came early, at a Chicago hotel confrontation in 1965, when Sam's brothers beat Bobby so severely that his jaw required medical treatment. One witness later recounted that Bobby looked like he'd fallen from a moving car. This was the first time he saw what fame could take from him, not just his reputation, but his face, his dignity, and his place in the industry he was trying to climb. Still, Bobby rose. By 1968, his guitar appeared on albums that collectively sold more than 3 million copies, including work with Wilson Pickett and Aretha Franklin. He wrote, arranged, toured, and recorded at a pace few artists survived. During the 1969-1972 period, he averaged 140-160 shows per year, often finishing one session at 2 a.m. and appearing at soundcheck the next afternoon. But the cracks formed silently. Behind the stage curtain, Bobby was losing control of the very life success had promised him. Cocaine entered his orbit in the late 1960 seconds, first as a party favor, then as a survival tool, a way to outrun exhaustion. By 1971, he had binges that lasted 4 to 6 days, sustained only by liquor and sedatives. At the same time, contracts were tightening around him. Session musicians were paid flat fees, often just $150, $250 for work on records that later sold millions. He was inside the palace, but chained to the floor. The final fracture in Act 3 came in 1974, the year of temporary blindness. Doctors traced it to a combination of head trauma and severe sleep deprivation. For Bobby, it felt like fate tapping him on the shoulder. And warning, you're running out of time. The collapse of Bobby Womack did not begin with drugs or scandal. It began decades earlier, in the small Cleveland home where a 10-year-old boy learned that love was conditional and praise came only after perfection. Friendly Womack Sr. pushed the 5 brothers through rehearsals so strict that Bobby later claimed they sometimes lasted 5 to 6 hours without pause. That pressure became the blueprint of his adulthood: perform flawlessly or be punished. This early emotional fracture, the terror of disappointing someone powerful, returned with a vengeance once fame magnified every flaw he tried to hide. The first major crack arrived in December 1964 with the death of Sam Cooke. Bobby was just 20, unprepared for the public's fury. His decision to marry Barbara Cooke 77 days after Sam's death triggered a backlash so intense that some radio stations temporarily stopped playing his music. The Cooke family's retaliation was equally brutal. At a Chicago hotel confrontation in March 1965, Sam's brothers beat him until his jaw swelled shut. Doctors recorded contusions across his cheek and temple. Bobby left that room, recognizing a truth he could never fully face. The man who launched his career had also left him with a legacy of enemies. Then came the revelation that detonated his private life: the affair with 7-year-old Linda Cooke, Barbara's daughter with Sam. When Barbara discovered them in 1970, she retrieved a .32 caliber pistol and fired the bullet, grazing Bobby's scalp. Medical reports described a wound of 2.5 centimeters, narrowly missing bone. Their marriage dissolved months later, leaving Bobby entangled in rumors, guilt, and a public narrative he could no longer control. Drugs moved in to fill the silence. By 1971, his cocaine intake had escalated into week-long cycles. Friends recounted binges where Bobby stayed awake 6 or 7 consecutive days, consuming lines hourly, washing them down with whiskey and sedatives. Financial records from the early 1970 seconds showed thousands of dollars, missing weekly accounts later attributed to addiction. The man once known for perfect pitch now struggled to complete takes in the studio. Engineers from the Muscle Shoals sessions in 1972 recalled him arriving glassy-eyed, sometimes late by 3 to 4 hours, sometimes without remembering the songs he was scheduled to cut. His eyesight began failing in 1974, the year of the crash. After his car slammed into a guardrail at approximately 40 miles per hour, he suffered a concussion that triggered temporary blindness lasting nearly 3 weeks. Doctors warned him that the combination of head trauma, sleep deprivation, and stimulants could permanently damage his optic nerve. Bobby ignored them. For him, the darkness was a sign, but he misinterpreted it. Instead of stepping back, he pushed harder, performing 120-plus shows that year despite collapsing backstage twice. Meanwhile, his personal relationships disintegrated. His brother Harry's murder on the 9th of March 1974, stabbed by his girlfriend during a fight, sent Bobby into a state he later described as falling out of myself. Harry had been his closest sibling, just 28 at the time of his death. Bobby set up a scholarship fund in his name, but privately, he spiraled. Cocaine became his coping mechanism. By 1975, he admitted going through an ounce a week, an amount that could cost upwards of $1,600 at the time. His career suffered in ways he couldn't publicly acknowledge. Multiple labels turned down his projects between 1976 and 1978, citing instability. One executive wrote internally that Bobby was unreliable for tours, unpredictable in negotiations, and impossible to insure. Despite releasing The Facts of Life in 1973 and Lookin' for a Love Again in 1974, which briefly hit the top 10, his momentum evaporated. Addiction changed his behavior too. Friends described him disappearing for 48-hour periods, sleeping in studios, talking to himself, or pacing while hallucinating figures from his past. Sam Cooke, Harry, even his younger self. He once confessed to staying awake so long that he forgot what year it was. By the early 1980 seconds, doctors diagnosed hypertension, arrhythmia, and early nerve deterioration. His weight fluctuated dramatically, dropping nearly 30 pounds in one 6-month period. His marriages failed, his finances collapsed, and yet the public saw only the vestiges of a legend, not the man running out of breath, out of money, out of clarity. The point of no return arrived silently. The day he admitted to a friend, "I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared of living like this." It was no overdose, no headline scandal, just the quiet recognition that he had reached the edge he'd been sprinting toward for decades. Bobby Womack had finally become a stranger to himself. Redemption came to Bobby Womack in fragments, not miracles. In 1981, after nearly a decade of turbulence, If You Think You're Lonely Now climbed to No. 3 on the Billboard R&B chart, a brief but undeniable resurgence. For the first time in years, he performed sober for entire sessions, sometimes recording 3 complete vocal takes in under 45 minutes, a pace that stunned producers who remembered the chaos of the 1,970 seconds. But his true second wind arrived much later. In 2012, at the age of 68, he released The Bravest Man in the Universe, his first album of original material in 18 years. Critics ranked it among the top albums of the year. Sales spiked after he performed at festivals in London and Paris. Yet behind the triumphant reviews lay a body weakened by colon cancer surgery, rapid weight loss of nearly 40 pounds, and the early stages of Alzheimer's diagnosed in 2013. In interviews, Bobby repeated one line more than any other: "I came back because music remembered me, even when I couldn't remember myself." When he died on the 27th of June 2014, fans mourned a soul legend. But one question lingered. Did fame save Bobby Womack in the end, or did it simply finish what life began?